Hello folks, I'm back. For those of you that follow me on Instagram and Facebook, you know I haven't really gone anywhere. I've still been painting, I've still been putting together some competition pieces, taking on some commissions here and there, but YouTube has been getting a little bit less love. And let's see if we can change that, starting with this video. In today's video, I am hanging out with my friend Steve Collis of No Bribe Foul, another YouTube channel all about Blood Bowl. It's a great channel. You should absolutely check it out. He and I are hanging out for an evening painting Scrappa Sorehead. Classic 3rd edition Blood Bowl sculpt. Real character to this piece, and I think we both had a blast painting him. Steve and I planned out our colour scheme in advance, making sure that we had the same paints for the most part, using a very limited palette and some punchy colours, including a few contrast paints, to really give our models some pop. This is not just your mate's slap job.
I mean, honestly, I like the old models. I think they have a ton of character, which I think is why we might have gravitated towards our choice today.
Definitely. I have grown more and more fond of the 2nd and 3rd edition Blood Bowl sculpts the older I've gotten. Especially like the Orc and Goblin characters. They just have a ton of personality to them.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I totally agree with you. They are phenomenal.
Yeah, in particular the Goblins and the Snarlings. It's incredible what they were willing to put out there. I would love to see some of the same courage now. I know people seem to like the more realistic, quote-unquote, or more kind of grim, darky in general, but I mean, one thing I like about Blood Bowl compared to other Games Workshop systems is that it knows it doesn't have to take itself super seriously.
Yeah, totally agree. It's what's kept me playing it. You know, it's a super solid rule set. It's not needed much change over the years, and it still holds up. And as you say, you know, it's not too serious. It's happy to make fun of itself at times.
I heard from somebody a couple times that one of the original devs said their vision for it was like Looney Tunes, but more violent. And especially if you look at some of the old artwork, it's really, really accurate.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you there. Yeah, I know Jervis was, you know, a kind of casual NFL fan, but they didn't necessarily have the best grip of the rules. I remember watching American football at like 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning around the same time as they were developing this, and it was often hard to understand because the show was really designed for American expats who already knew the rules, so the commentators didn't give much by way of explanation as to what was going on the field. I thought we could get together and have a little bit of fun with Scrappa Sorehead here, the old 3rd edition model, and do a quick paint job. We're going to mostly use contrast paints, at least to get the basic colours locked in. And then from there, we'll see where we go, how much time we have, how long it takes, and we can start building up a few more layers and put a bit more detail into him as we go.
Cool.
So, diving into it with any model, the key things that we want to remember, the old adage, faces and bases. So, we're gonna put most of our effort here into the skin tones. We're gonna do some fun stuff with the armor and the clothing and etc. But we're really gonna dial in on the face. So faces and flesh tones are usually where I start with miniature painting. And in this particular instance, we're gonna just start with a quick coat of a green. I don't think you've actually got a contrast green on your end, so you're probably gonna just use mood green. Maybe thin it a bit with Lamia Medium just to give us a bit of relief.
Sure.
As usual with my painting style, I've started with a prime of black and then laid down a zenithal coat, and I think you've done the same.
Yes, I have.
This just helps in a number of ways. For contrast paints, it really helps because you've got a start at shadows and highlights already. With even if you're painting with regular paints, having that zenithal gives you something to key off of for values in terms of brightness and darkness, so that as you're going through the painting process, you can sketch those in more quickly, you know roughly where they should be, without having to overthink it and get too wound up trying to deal with that. But for this one, we're going to just slap on some contrast paint.
So we're just doing the flesh right now?
So yeah, just block in the flesh. As always with contrast paints, you want to be accurate as much as possible because you really don't want to have to go back in and blank out the areas of overpaint, especially with the Zenithal Prime, because then you've kind of got to sometimes blend it out a bit.
Right.
But we're just going to prime this up, get a nice good green on it. I'm being pretty chill on this one. I'm not super concerned about where it's pooling. Normally I'd put a lot more care into that.
Mm-hmm.
What you find with metal sculpts like this, especially the older hand sculpted stuff, is it's often still kind of bearing the tool marks from the sculptor's original
Absolutely
SketchUp, which is phenomenal just for the kind of the feel of it. But it does mean that contrast paint isn't going to work as well because it's not smoothly flowing off of the raised surfaces. It's going to collect a little bit in areas you wouldn't expect and you wouldn't want the light to catch. So we are going to have to fix a little bit of that.
I just got through painting old Metal Tomb Kings, so.
Oh, yes.
Oh, man. In particular, a couple of the, I guess, what do you call it, like ribcage, torso sections. You can tell where it's almost like they just took a toothpick and just drug it across the flat surface to make the ribs on the backside on some of them. So I was having to paint in the depth because it just wasn't clearly defined.
All right, so I'm just going in and quickly cleaning up some of the bits and pieces where there's a bit of overpainting. I didn't actually warn you about it in advance. I don't know where you're at because I can't see you on camera. But try and keep the ears, the inside of the ears unpainted. We'll put a bit of red in there. If you've painted it up, don't worry about it.
Okay.
So I think you're pretty new to Blood Bowl, right? Relatively speaking.
I played a long time ago being like a decade-ish. And then I was out of it for a while. And I have come back. I'm about 2 years and change just being back in. I was just doing a league at a local store at first, did a couple seasons in that, and then I just kind of fell back in love with it and really wanted to get back into tournaments. So.
Nice.
But I mean, I'm not completely like, I don't know, like just in coming back, I picked up the new rule set really quickly. But I'm kind of a rules guy. I like reading rule books. So even in that league, when I came back, there were people who'd already played a couple seasons under the new rule set, and then they were like trying to like stack claws and mighty blow and stuff like that. And I was like, that doesn't work. And they're like, who are you? And I'm like, well, if you look on page whatever. I always try not to be that guy, but I end up feeling like that guy.
I always kind of appreciate that guy because I cannot stand reading rules books. So yeah. I'm always keen for an excuse to just have somebody teach it to me. Like YouTube is a godsend for learning board games.
I want to like YouTube for learning board games, but there's no accountability for when people get things wrong. So, because if you go in the comments, but it's more of a raw accuracy thing. If you're just trying to throw some dice and play a game, like there's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, and very little of what I play is competitive. Like even tournament play, when I go in for it, is pretty on the chill side.
That's what I like about Blood Bowl. Like you can absolutely approach it at whatever level you want to and still have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's refreshing.
It's the only reason that I still play it like that, honestly.
Yeah. It's refreshing playing a game where there's not expensive prize support. Like it's one of those things where like I got most brutal at my last tournament. So I came back and I was telling some of my coworkers about it. And they're like, oh, how much did you win? And I'm like, a trophy? Like, sometimes you get some store credit. Like, it's a clout game, and that's good. I feel like that's the purest form of competition. Because if you try to mix,
Yeah.
if you try to mix money and dice rolls, like it just gets gross real quick. Okay, I believe I am about there. And yeah, I'm
All right.
relying on my camera to be as good as my camera is going to be. This is my first, probably, time trying to get like an actual setup for painting. That's something I'm not opposed to doing more of in the future.
It's looking good so far.
Okay.
Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to crack out the skeleton horde.
Okay.
And we're going to quickly paint up the bindings on his feet. And we're also going to do the skull in the jester's hat on his pogo stick.
Do you do any, like, do you thin it at all or just go straight from the pot?
I nearly always go straight from the pot.
Okay. We were talking earlier.
As you said, like Cygor Brown is one of the few where I'll thin it. There are actually a couple of contrast paints that I kind of wish they were actually a little bit darker than they are.
The first wave of contrast paints seemed kind of inconsistent. That second wave, man, it's like a I don't know, a bunch of Crayola markers or something. It's super bright, super consistent.
Yeah, that's true.
The first wave, though, summer watery summer sticker.
Yeah. There's actually some that I've kind of learned to love for being different.
Mm-hmm.
Space Wolf Grey, which I'm going to be using. I know you don't have it, but I'll be using for the metal to do a quick non-metallic metal.
That's
It
one.
hasn't got the highest coverage, but it does work phenomenal.
Yeah, I need to learn the two techniques I really need to learn. I need to learn to paint non-monstrous flesh and non-metallic metals. Those are the two I've kind of just been putting off a little bit because I'm like, this is going to take a lot of work. And I mean, the old tabletop routine was just like prime, base coat, accent wash, call it good, you know. But I've definitely evolved a bit from there. But I got really into blending, like really, really into blending. And then the more I look at stuff, people are like, I don't blend anymore. And I'm like, oh, never mind. But I want to have all the tools I can.
I wish I was better at blending, honestly. It's the one thing that I'm always disappointed in myself for. I don't feel I blend colours as well as I would like. Okay, so the one thing, I know I said I wasn't going to thin contrast paints, but I am actually going to thin contrast paint slightly here.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just set aside a little bit of skeleton horde, and I'm just going to thin it slightly, and I'm going to use this for the eyes. So I left the eyes white, and this just takes them off of being kind of like glow-in-the-dark white and gives them a bit more of a realistic hue.
On the skull or on the goblin?
On the goblin, the skull eyes are going to be blacked out.
Okay.
I'm not going for any kind of glow effects for them with this. We're keeping it, or I'm keeping this a fairly quick, light paint job, so not going to go too far down that rabbit hole.
I've been trying to get into Warcry, but I can't find any other human beings to play with.
Warcry is quite fun. It's very like beer and pretzels. It's a very, very light game.
Yeah, I like skirmish games in general.
Have you tried Warhammer Underworlds?
I have not. I mean, I see it around, but...
That is my second favorite behind BloodBowl.
Okay.
And I know you're a card gamer as well, I think.
Yeah.
Because of that deck building angle to it as well.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't even realize there was a deck involved.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. So there are two decks for each side.
Okay.
One deck is like your point scoring, your objectives, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other deck is upgrades and things that you can play on your models.
Okay.
To make them do stuff or give them, basically instants, attachments, and yeah, really, really fun game. We're going to switch to the Cygor Brown now.
Okay.
And we're just going to do the wood on the Pogo Stick.
Okay.
And then let me know once you've done that. You may want to
thin this a little bit just so that it looks a bit more
not black,
wood-like and a bit less black.
I remember using the, I guess from the 2000s, the washes they had. And the first thing I did when I came back into the hobby and saw that contrast paints were a thing was I was like, I need to get some browns. Because I remember I used to be able to use, I forget what the name of it was, but it was kind of a...
Devlin mud.
Yeah. It was like
Devlin
everything.
mud.
It was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I feel like a lot of people ridicule the original contrast lineup for having so many browns, but yeah, but
brown
it's
just
such a
works.
useful color.
Like if you don't actually know what else is going on, even if you know nothing about color theory or have any plan, like it's gonna look okay at least.
Right, and also just realistically, a lot of, especially for the fancy stuff, a lot of what people wear is brown, right? Like you've got leather, you've got undyed cloth, you've got wood, you've got all of these things that you want to be able to differentiate them, and so you kind of do really need a little bit of that
variety to be able to do that.
Yeah, one thing with Kubla Khan, I wish I could stick around for that skin class you were doing. I only got.
Oh, you should, man.
I only got the pass for Friday.
Oh.
For BloodBowl, but
that's too bad. Yeah. Ethnic skin tones has kind of become my signature convention class.
That's cool. Yeah, and like I said, I literally just have Amazon's are my next project, so very appropriate. Should release a Bob Ross style DVD.
It's a class I love teaching. It's just a lot of fun. Basically, just kind of go on a monologue rant about how inconsiderate companies are in their naming of paints and
yeah.
Okay, so I've moved on to the metals just because you and I will probably end up having to do these in a slightly different manner and give you a quick rundown of NMM. But for myself, I'm just doing a quick coat of Space Wolf Grey, pretty heavily applied. I want quite a lot to pull in the recesses. I'm going to leave the metal on your one off for the moment, and I'm going to switch it over to the red and the green, the red and the yellow. So, what we're going to do is we're going to do a half red, half yellow pattern on the clothes and the hat. Okay, so we're going to start with the yellow. It's a slightly lighter colour, so if it overshoots a bit, it's going to be a bit more forgiving for the red to come in afterwards. So, I am going to do it so that the right half of the Jester's hat is yellow. And I think I'm going to match that for the uniform. So the right half of the uniform and the right half of the Jester's hat are going to be yellow. Looking forward at the model, my right. So actually the Goblin's left half is going to be yellow from the Goblin's perspective. So I'm now going to go, and I think I'm going to do a zigzag pattern on that shoulder pad of red and yellow.
Okay.
Probably in the same directions. So the yellow's on the right half as you look at him, and the red's on the left half.
Okay.
So I'm going to do that quickly. I'm going to leave the studs unpainted, I think.
Okay.
And the bells on the end of the Jester's hat. I'm actually going to do the bells on the Jester's hat yellow. I'm going to make them into a bit of an NMM gold, I think. But the ones on the studs on the shoulder pad, I'm going to do in Space Wolf Grey, or in grey. So.
Okay.
I Okay, so I'm going to take us through the steps of turning this grey into something that looks a little bit more metallic. Now, this is a very quick, dirty cheats NMM. It's going to always look a little bit cartoony. But the flip side of that is we're not going to be spending a ton of time working on it. We're not going to go for smooth blends. We're kind of just going to dab in white in the places that it makes sense. So before we get to the highlights, we're actually going to just reinforce the shadows a little bit. So I'm going to get some black. I'm using Chaos Black from, or I think they just call it black now, from Coat Arms, which is one that I am particularly fond of. And I'm going to go for the deep recesses just to really darken them down. On this model, it's particularly important because I'm really wanting to bring out the detail, and the metallic areas on this are just so highly textured that you really want to do this. So just not overworking it, not kind of really filling it up.
Are we just painting the low lights, basically?
Yeah, we're basically painting our shadows in.
Okay.
It's just, only really focusing on the areas that are very, very definitely shadows, right? The super recessed areas. We're not kind of blending or going up to midtones. We're just getting like the inside the coils and stuff like that. I also have a little bit of miscast on my model, which I didn't pick up in prep because, as we mentioned before we hit record, I may have prepped the wrong model for today. So I kind of just quickly airbrush primed and zenithal Scrappa like after work before we jumped on this call. So I'm not worrying overly about like hitting these recesses. I'm just hitting ones that I notice as maybe not being as dark as I would like. For the most part, they're actually already pretty good. I did quickly touch into the eyes and nose of the jester, and I'm gonna just quickly do Scrappa's eyes as well. So I've done one eye. Now the trick is to match the other eye. Sometimes you want to turn it upside down. Sometimes you want to live dangerously. These are sculpted nice and big, so it's actually pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
Hoping that the camera.
I feel like on these old Goblin models, they put more detail into the faces than anything else.
Yeah, faces and bases, man. Faces and bases. That's what it's all about. With those in place, what we're going to do is we're going to do our cheat highlights, which is what really turns this into a kind of NMM-ish look.
Okay.
Now, this is the point where it really matters where you expect your highlights to be. I'm using white. I should actually talk about this a little bit. So I use a heavy body acrylic for my white. It's titanium white, so probably shouldn't be consuming this in large quantities. But so brush flickers beware. But it has decent coverage. It's quite thick, which means, and it's pretty forgiving on thinning, especially if you use a bit of medium. But for this purpose, I'm just going to thin it so that it doesn't have 100% opacity, and I'm going to just use it as kind of like a touch highlight. Now, because it's not 100% opacity, what that means is that if I want to reinforce the highlights a little bit, I can go back and highlight them up again. Now, what I'm doing is I'm just highlighting down this coil, like hitting the same part of each coil, in line with where my light is coming from. So for me, that is kind of from left-hand side at about 45 degrees. So not front on, not side on, but halfway between on the left, and I'm using the white, trying to keep it reasonably consistent across each coil. Some variance is fine, the coils are probably not super even. Making sure I'm not going into the recesses where the coils aren't. Moving the model if I need to get the angle. Okay, so with the springs done, I did the foot slightly, and what I did is just short strokes across the foot, so it kind of looks like a bit of a brushed metal effect. This is an easy way of avoiding having to like really blend. And then as the final highlight, once that's dried, you can do one stroke straight down at the exact angle of the light. The chains are super easy. You just want to do a dot at the highest point.
Okay.
And then if the bottom curve is exposed, you want to do a dot on the inside of the bottom curve. And that catches the kind of catch light at the bottom of the chain. The chain wrapped around his fist is a little bit harder just because of the angles, but just kind of any edge that's so obvious and upward facing, you probably want to just hit lightly. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be super consistent, as long as it gives the impression. We're keeping this fairly cartoony. Yeah, I'm really leaning into the shapes of the model to just make my life easier, and contrast paint allows me to do that, which is why I'm such a big fan of it. Now, I'm doing the reverse. I'm making the highlights smaller on the reverse. In general, you want the back of the model to be a little less bright than the front of the model. So I'm just toning it down a little bit. For the little spiky bits on the shoulder pad, I'm just going to highlight the edges a little bit, focusing mostly on the upward one that's facing where the light is coming from. And one of the things that I do to keep light sources consistent but still have the back angle be slightly interesting is I imagine a primary light source as described before, right, coming in from the left when you're looking dead on the model. And then I do the same thing but turn the model 180. So the secondary light source is coming from the exact opposite point of the primary light model, or still above, but like 180 degrees rotated around. And that one I make slightly less bright. Just kind of touch in those highlights. And we're nearly done, I think. So I'm gonna do now just some quick highlights and detailing on the skin. Particularly around the face, a little bit the knuckles and the knees, and then I'm gonna call it done. I'll probably do some more work on him after we've kind of finished the call. But this should give you a sense of how I take contrast paints and I move them up to the next level. And this is something that I do on a lot of commission pieces, on a lot of my own gaming pieces. It gives a good balance between, time and effect. So, I'm actually going to quickly bring my palette onto camera so that folks can see this. What I have is quite a basic palette. I've got a red. In this case, it's the Mephiston red from Games Workshop. I've got the black that I've been using before. I've got the white, and I talked about the white a little bit. And then I've got two other colors here. I've got a green, which is one of my favorite colors of all time. It's livery green from Vallejo Game Color. And then I also have a yellow, and in this case I've got a medium yellow from Vallejo Model Air, which is just the yellow that I happen to lay my hands on. It's quite a warm yellow. It's actually a bit warmer than the Bad Moon yellow we used to begin with, so it's not going to work super well on the yellow areas, but that's not what I'm going to use it for here. So What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the livery green and I'm kind of just going to test it on the model and see how bright of a highlight it is. So I'm going to start with the eyebrows because they can be pretty sharp and it'll still look natural. I'll do the nose as well. Probably should have shaken this paint better is what I'm learning because the coverage is not what it should be. Now, I know you don't have the same paints selection that I do here, Steve. So what I'm going to suggest for you is use some Bad Moon Yellow in with your Mooch Green to bring up a highlight yellow, or highlight green, I should say. I think actually the Vallejo, for me, the livery green neat should do the trick pretty well, actually. Okay, so I've kind of done just very, very quick highlights here and there with the green. I'm not trying to get this perfect right now, but just highlighting up. Now, here is where we start bringing some life to the flesh. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a good amount of our highlight green and just a tiny little touch of the red. And we're going to mix it in. And we're going to get a kind of brown colour. Because we've basically just desaturated our green completely to a kind of fairly unpleasant green, if I'm honest. And we're going to just paint that onto the lips and the nose. And it is really the tiniest amount of red that I've mixed in here. It's just to start blending in some transition. And we're going to use the same color on the nose, just to give him like a kind of bloodshot nose, like a kind of, burst blood vessel kind of nose from all of the bashes and knocks that he's taken. I'm going to use this quite thinned down and layer it up a little bit, and then once we've done a few layers we'll introduce a little bit more red to the mix and we'll build it up again in even smaller areas. Do you want to give a quick rundown on your channel, what it is for folks that are interested?
Yeah. So my channel, the channel name is No Bribe Foul. The primary show that I do on it is called Turnover. The reason I made the channel was to focus on American Blood Bowl tournaments, or largely American, I cover whatever. But coming from the card game scene, it was very common to see people give matchup videos and their deck list, and they would break their deck list down bit by bit, and they explain each little increment of it, why do I have 2 of this, 3 of this, that kind of thing. And it seemed like there was some of that level of coverage for Blood Bowl, but not to the degree that I had seen there. So I was like, oh, there's a little bit of a niche to fill here. And then I noticed how much of the content, again, is basically anywhere other than America. And I was like, it'd be cool to be able to bring that perspective and be able to show, So I did it. I kind of flirt with the vlog style, tournament coverage. And I try to balance it out pretty well, but I always try to have winner interviews. I try to have the winner lists, so I can get their thoughts. I always ask people, the winners, like, hey, if someone's trying to get into the hobby, what would you do? I am doing some Blood Bowl 3 coverage too, but ultimately I've been pretty transparent about this. My goal is to get you to join the cult of going to in-person tournaments. So
Fantastic.
I think it's an honest mission.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool to make a time capsule, it's cool to have, it's like a high school yearbook, 10 years from now, you can be like, I remember when I used to play Blood Bowl, and then, my video will be there, and you can go back and, like, kind of get back and get those feelings again. Blood Bowl events are so awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't go to a huge number of tournaments anymore. I went to a few more when I was a bit younger. But it is nice to be able to keep up with
what folks are doing, how they're doing at tournament levels, seeing Brian Chu dominate like he always does.
Everywhere, constantly, yeah.
Exactly. And, I've also really liked the Blood Bowl 3 coverage because I haven't taken the plunge yet. I have 1 and 2. I do want to get Blood Bowl 3, given that it aligns with the new rule set, gives you a way to practice. But I've kind of been holding fire, waiting to see how it goes, waiting until the full team roster is, so I'll probably take the plunge soon. I might wait for it to hit a Steam sale or something and then do it. But in the meantime, it's great watching the coverage. We hung out and hobbied for a good part of the evening, but even after the call, I wanted to do a few more touch-ups here and there, and so did Steve. This footage right now is some of the work that I put in afterwards, about 30 minutes total, mostly focusing on fixing the skin tones, giving them a little bit more vibrancy, and touching up a few mistakes. And here we have the final results. I think they came out pretty well for an evening's painting, and hopefully you feel the same way. Steve is a great guy, so be sure to stop by and check out his channel, all about Blood Bowl, Blood Bowl Tactics, Blood Bowl 3 the video game, US-based Blood Bowl tournaments. He covers it all. He is also doing a drop on his take of the evening at the same time this video drops, so why not head over there and check that out. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it, subscribe if you're not already, maybe throw in a comment there, maybe even a nice one, and maybe even spread the word with your friends, let them know that this is a channel to watch. But for now, thank you for watching, and later days.